The topic of the Leadership Exchange keynote address is expanding your role in patient care. This subject is critical to the future of laboratory medicine and the quality of patient care. Pathologists and laboratory professionals must become more visible. We have to communicate with clinicians and help them decide what tests to order and how to interpret their tests. This is the value-added service that laboratories must provide. It's the major contribution we can make to improve our nation's healthcare system. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Michael LaPosada, is well known for his experience guiding clinicians through the maze of laboratory tests. Dr. LaPosada is Professor of Pathology and Medicine at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. He is also Pathologist-in-Chief at Vanderbilt University Hospital and Director of the Clinical Laboratories. He previously served as Director of Clinical Laboratories at the Massachusetts General Hospital and on the faculty in pathology at Harvard Medical School. Dr. LaPosada earned his MD and PhD degrees from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and completed a postdoctoral research fellowship and residency in laboratory medicine at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. He took his first faculty position at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine here in Philadelphia in 1985, where he was assistant professor and director of the hospital's coagulation laboratory. Dr. LaPosada has received several major teaching awards at Harvard, at Massachusetts General Hospital, and at Penn. He was honored in 2005 by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Institute of Quality in Laboratory Medicine for his work on improving communication between laboratories and clinicians. Please give a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Dr. Michael LaPosada.
Thanks, Barbara. Okay, you're going to unmute me. There we go. And this is coming down so you can see. And let me just say what an honor it is to be here, especially with Pat, Michelle, and Kay, this special time, recognizing their achievements. So let me just say that when I first entered the clinical laboratory, when I first saw it, it was 1972. In my hometown in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and I remember it being one instrument, an SMA instrument that did 12 tests, and there was a colorimeter where they did glucose tests. Holy cow. And then I became a resident, went through college, medical school, and said, you know, that clinical lab piece, that is the coolest thing in the world. I want to go back. And then I became a resident, and then I started to get calls from people asking questions. What should I do about this or that? And when I realized what the questions were, I thought, if you don't know the answer to that, somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody who you're trying to take care of. If you don't know what to do with the PTT when it's 80, that person that's getting heparin or has a factor deficiency is in big trouble. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about helping doctors pick the right tests and help them do the right thing after the result is generated. And you know, for a long time we thought, oh, you know whose job this is? This is the job of the pathologist. Guess what? It is all of our jobs. All of us. Because in fact, somebody has to step up and make sure that there's an advocate for the patient so that that patient doesn't have the PTT of 88 seconds and doesn't get treated correctly. So let's take a look at going beyond the performance of the lab test. So this is, you've done the lab test, but now we have a poor clinician and he or she can't figure out which test to do to follow up, and they also don't know what to do with the result. So here's a description of the problem. We think that every doctor out there who gets a result that you generated knows what to do with it. Guess what? That's wrong. And I think that that sense of they must know what to do with a PTT that's 88 seconds because we give them so many. The fact is, it's down at that level. You know, at first we started to think, when I first delved into this problem, that they only needed help with the really complicated things. I've had so many doctors tell me, can you figure out what these abnormal liver function tests mean? So we're talking about some very basic things where if we gave them a little more information, it would make a huge clinical difference. So when you look at all of the abnormalities that there are here in clinical pathology in the laboratories, we have to understand first that they don't know what to do with the common things. And remember, the tests in the clinical laboratory outnumber those in anatomic pathology. And when we think of anatomic path, could you imagine a breast biopsy given back to a surgeon and having the anatomic pathologist say, just call me if you have a question on that, okay? Sounds ridiculous. Could you imagine getting a CAT scan and having the radiologist say, well, we'll give that right back to the internist, and if they have a question, they'll call. But what do we do in the clinical lab? Why do they think that we live in this black box that's one big instrument where you throw tubes in and numbers come out? Because, in fact, we just give them a number. We throw it over the wall instead of having that interaction where we systematically take all the complicated stuff and tell them what it means. So here's Mercy Hospital, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, 1972. And I saw the 1.5 pathologists sign out AP cases. And in 1972, if you looked at all the things that were diagnosed microscopically, it was pretty clear that the bar was big, and if you asked the internists and the obstetricians there, could you look at that through the microscope, look at the glass slide and get it right? They'd say, are you kidding? Impossible. So what happened is there was this big gap. And everybody realized back then that you needed an anatomic pathologist to interpret that, and you couldn't go straight back to the person who ordered it. But what was going on in that clinical lab? Well, it was what I described for you earlier. There it is. A few tests, and you know what? Everybody in the hospital knew what to do with the glucose because there really weren't that many things defined by the laboratory test. So what has happened since? Ooh, boy. So if you just take my field of coagulation, and I see patients in coagulation. I've practiced in Boston before I moved to Vanderbilt for 15 years, seeing patients who bled and clotted, as well as serving as a lab director. So I know it from both sides. And there are so many things in coagulation now, huge, all these factors, and now there's all the mutations in the genes for the factors, and what does that mean when you have an intron 22 and factor 8? Whoa! And does the person receiving the test result have any hope of knowing that? No. So now we have this big gap. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And you know what we've done for about 10 years? I did the residency in 83 to 85. For about 10 years, we just sort of ignored it. And we said, nah. And then in the mid-90s, people have said, well, you know what? There is a big problem, but we don't know quite what to do with that. And then 10 years later, the CDC starts to put through this Institute for Quality and Laboratory Medicine. Now there's a big crisis. We write the Institute of Medicine report and say we're going to see all the errors where they took out the left kidney when the right kidney was diseased, and they gave you 400 milligrams instead of 40. And guess what? Now they're actually thinking about laboratory errors. What does it mean when somebody doesn't know what to do with a lab test result? So now I think it's actually front and center, and we have a chance to really do something in direct connection to the patient. So who in the clinical laboratory knows? What if you went around to the doctors and said the PTT is 88? You know, I'll bet you the people in the clinical lab could say heparin, and I bet you there are more people, if you took percentage of people who work at that bench in coag that said, the PTT is long. I know which factors, when deficient, make the PTT long. Now, if you surveyed all the doctors and you said, would you know? They're not going to know. They're not going to know. But you do. Somebody is going to be able to say that. Now, for a long time, you say, well, I can't be the one offering that message. I mean, somebody else has to offer that message. What's it like on the floor? When you're taking care of a patient, who's making clinical decisions? Yeah, there's a hospitalist, maybe a doctor. There's also the RN who says, okay, yeah, I see, whoa, the critical value is low. I see the PO2 is low. They're going to adjust something. The LPN might make some decisions. How is it that if we look at our team of maybe the pathologist, lab supervisor, med tech, MLTs, we're all in this together. We all have knowledge, and believe it or not, all have knowledge that that clinician needs. You know something, they don't. So somehow we have to get to that recognition and help the clinician as the patient advocate.